Welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast, where we explore the game-changing understanding that can unlock new levels of performance and well-being in the workplace. If you want to be part of the new breed of leaders in business, if you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber, and if you want to be part of a revolution in human potential, then join us to discover the powerful resource that lives before our psychology.
Welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. And today I've got, a great conversation lined up because this guest has been on the show 3 times before, but we haven't chatted for over 3 years. We just realized it was 2020 when we last spoke, and we did a series of 3 wonderful episodes all about the magic of coaching and what the secret sauce to coaching is. So it was about time we got back in contact. And I said to Dominic Scafidi, come along, Dom, let's get on the show again. Let's see what's fresh for us. And let's have one of our wonderful conversations. And very luckily, listeners, he said yes. So, Dominic, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, terrific. How could I say no? We had some amazing conversations. So I'm thrilled to be back again and to see where we are today, because I know everything's gone deeper for both of us, the only direction it goes, right?
Exactly. And aren't we lucky we do this job? So I'm really looking forward to this. So in case any wayward listener cannot remember a little bit about your background, Dominic,
Yes.
Can you just give a couple of minutes about you and what you do and how
Great.
come?
So I'm an executive coach, master certified coach, credentialed through the International Coaching Federation. And I've been coaching for about 15 years. And I had a 20-year corporate career before that in large organizations, sales, marketing, and then HR. My last corporate role was a vice president of human resources in a large retail organization. And then coaching since then. And my business is basically it's senior leaders, executives are a lot of my one-to-one clients. And then also team coaching. I will coach those teams, often a leadership team as well. And the third little aspect of what I do around this corporate stuff is training leaders and managers to become or to be great coaches rather than good bosses. So I'm training coaching abilities and skill within there. So yeah.
Yeah. So what that means is you're the real deal, proper, I say, genuine corporate experience. Got the T-shirt there, and now you're working with business leaders in the thick of their day-to-day business lives. And you are helping them see some really profound things, because that's what the beauty and art of coaching is. Let's get stuck in a little bit. So and we were talking about this before we pressed record, but
Yes.
What's been really fresh for you and powerful for you in the last couple of years that we can get stuck into?
Yeah. As we had spoken in before, just this understanding that everything we're ever dealing with in business, in any sort of aspiration we have, is only ourselves. I can say it like that. It's really only ourself. The challenge we have is only our own thinking. It is only our own mind. This is the only challenge or issue we have. And that all we are ever doing is in a state of expansion of our own seeing or realization of our own thinking. It just begins to expand and become more. We are basically, what I would say, is one big self-limitation. Who we think we are. We live as who we think we are, leaders, executives that I work with. That all we ever do is we deal with who they think they are, and we point them toward who they really are, which is far more than they think.
Mm.
And that is sort of the grounded and if anything's happened, I've only become more and more clear about that.
Yeah.
And it's the only piece of work we ever need to do.
And you said it so beautifully earlier, is that nothing is solid. So every thought is finite. Every thought is already cooked. It's already formed. So by definition, it is more finite than something infinite. Now, where that gets really taking those trite, profound statements I just said into the work that you and I do, is that, maybe you can give us an example of this when I finished, is that you take a business leader who looks at a situation or a circumstance and says, well, that's what the circumstance is. And if I'm lucky, I can have different thinking about the circumstance. I can, depending on a good day or a bad day, I can go, oh, well, the market's tough, but yeah, I'll find a way. Now, there's still solidity in there. And what you're pointing to is no, it's not solid. There's no circumstance or situation or person that is solidified. Can you just say a bit more about that? Maybe even give it a bit of an example?
Yeah, this, by the way, and the way we talk about it is certainly not the way that it would show up in a coaching conversation, because we're always, as coaches, meeting the person where they are and challenging. That's part of an important thing, is challenging. And the way I see it today is how they are self-limiting. So if you take even in this example, there is nothing solid really to be dealing with. There's not an economy out there. There's not a certain condition. There's not where, and it's solid, like now I have to think about it. Now I have to deal with that. The truth is that the very thing that you are dealing with it in your own mind. So I often joke about this, where I say, let's take even a practical example of a leader wanting to be wanting more responsibility or an ability in their career to do something else, but they're like, yes, but my boss is a micromanager.
Yeah.
Now, so there's a pretty solid thing. You've got a boss, micromanager, and they are the way they are, right? And it seems like a real problem, like you've got to deal with them. But upon deeper examination, I'm not sure if there is or isn't a boss. And we're not going to debate that, because here's the thing we can agree, that the only boss you have a problem with, if we really look, the one you have a problem with is the one that exists in your mind, that has been narrated by your own thinking. And you say, yeah, but I get that. But there is a real one. They walk around this office. And by the way, and all my colleagues agree.
Yeah.
All my colleagues agree. In other words, there is a mass consciousness reality to that form, not just my own. Right? There's a bunch of agreement around it. And I say, yes, but we don't need to debate that, because you'll never have to deal with that. The only one that'll ever give you a problem, that will ever only get in your way, that will not promote you, that will, cause you a lot of trouble. The only one that will do that is the one in your mind that is made of the thought that you're narrating. That's the one that will cause you trouble. Right? There will never be another boss that you will ever have to deal with or interact with, right? And so just upon a little bit of exploration there, you can sort of start to see the truth of this, right?
And I think then, let's take that same scenario and take it a bit further, because then the other limitation we put in is a degree of limitation or cause of effect on what can happen in change and what can't. So people have change happens in a linear fashion. So for that boss to be different, the one that's in my mind, that just can't happen overnight. That can't magic itself.
Yeah.
Let's say I was going to turn this business around or something. That there's things that have to happen, cause, to create effect. Now, when we get into looking at creation and the magic of creating, and I know this is a topic you're so eloquent about and clear about, Dominic, so maybe you can share a bit of your wisdom on this, is that doesn't work in the way we've been taught either.
Right.
Around the synchronicity and the serendipity of creation. So my guess is that when you're working with a client and they're looking for something to be different, we want, number one, pointing to the fact, well, the only reality of the situation is the one in your mind. And secondly, the possibility of that being different is not shackled by linear cause and effect in the way that we might think.
Oh, very good. In fact, the from a purely spiritual understanding, when I say that, I mean an understanding of who you really are, your true nature, and the nature of reality, right? So, because the more you understand that, the more effective you are, the more ultimately the happier you are, the more joyful you are. When you go deeper into understanding who you really are, your true nature, and the nature of reality, right? That realization or understanding is just a further and further movement toward joy. We'll call it, it's a further and further movement toward everything you truly desire. Everything you truly desire is in that direction. So, but what happens? It is like, let's go to the practical reality. So I have a business, and we have terrible customer feedback. And so this is real. We get complaints. We have complaints, and they wait too long on our whatever to get things done, or whatever, to call us, or like this. And so a typical, right? This is the mesmerized by the created, already manifested, created reality. As I am mesmerized or hypnotized by it, I lock into, well, what's going on? How long are the wait times on our phones? How long are the da-da-da? And now it's interesting, because if you look at this, my attention to it, my focus upon it, takes that thing and is expanding it in the direction of my attention. So this problem, I want to call a meeting. I want a meeting, and I want everyone at the meeting, because we're going to get to the root of this problem. And I want to hear all of the issues that are going on and all that. So now I'm expanding. I want even a deeper focus and movement of attention, not just my attention. I want everyone's attention on what this issue is. And what's really interesting is I don't realize that I am solidifying a reality that I do not want by our attention to it. And it's like a trick. It's like we got taken in, because there was a complaint, or there are complaints. There is a problem. It's a real problem. It's costing us money. So we need to put our attention here. And it's like a trick. We got taken in. We got taken in to invest something more valuable than our resources and dollars. Is we've now invested our own consciousness.
Yeah.
The only creator of all things, which is consciousness, we just got taken in, investing all of our consciousness into what we do not want, that has been created some way, somehow. And now we're all looking at it, and now we're all talking about it, and now we are all acting upon it as if it were real. And so now what magic would look like would be, wow, these wait times are too long, and we're losing business, and dollars are an issue, whatever it's costing us. And what is now clear, what is now more clear that we do want, which is What we want is to serve. What we want is to offer customers what they want. What we want is to bring value to them. What we want is to respect them in their time. Now, where did I just shift all attention? Let's call a meeting. Let's call a meeting and speak to that creation. Let's call a meeting. Let's bring everyone together with a consciousness directed to what we are creating. What is now more clear because of that issue, that is really what we desire to create. So that now investment in consciousness is something that can be created, which does not stand on the changing of a solid, because there never was a solid. So it does not stand on or rely on the changing of a thing. It's really a fresh creation from nothing. And that's what transformation looks like.
And I think that's so, I mean, listeners, I'd urge people to listen to that bit 2 or 3 times, because there's a lot of nuance in there. Because at one level, it might just sound like, oh yeah, focus on what you want, not what you don't want. You know, that classic pink elephant thing where if you imagine, you know, but actually, no, there's more to it than that. In that, let me see if I can add a little bit and you can tell me whether I'm in the right direction. But if we are looking at a problem, well, as a problem coming from lack and scarcity, right? Coming from seeking, here's something that's wrong, the problem, and we need to fix this to get to okay, or to, you know, we're already putting the attention on the lack, on the perceived scarcity. And that then puts more consciousness investment, as you said. I love the idea of investing consciousness. Where should we invest our consciousness? You know,
yes.
like we invest our assets, but, you know, the asset or the business being consciousness. Brilliant. I love your way of putting it. So we're investing our consciousness on the scarcity and the lack, which perpetuates the scarcity and the lack because you're coming from limitation. Because people might be going, okay, so what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is, because there is a thing in the business that needs to be, or can be different, right? There's an emergence, you know, is to see that there's nothing solid to overcome or to be in scarcity of, but there is always emergence, and the emergence of faster lead times or customer service responses is there. And if we move the balance sheet investment of consciousness to that, then that's going to create that.
Yes.
So it's still addressing the business issue of wait times, but it's coming from a very different point. But I think it's so nuanced, is that it's not just saying it differently, going, oh yeah, well, I do think it's a lack, but I'll put it in positive language for the meeting because it looks like I've read that book. That this is why it all comes back to what we think we are, whether we can ever be in lack and in solidity, right? So it's the space, not the language.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're right. We can never be in lack or scarcity because there is infinite creative potential. There are infinite possibilities of thought, of seeing this. So you're not stuck with what that is with the wait times. And I have there's such an interesting real life that came out of my corporate as opposed to the coaching. In real life, there was an issue where as head of HR, I was going to move our sort of benefits call a service company. And so there were companies that were talking to us that they wanted the business to go to. And it was fascinating because one of the companies actually said to us, they go, oh, we have the lowest hold wait times. Your employees will be able to get to us, and, you know, all of that. And then there was another company that didn't talk about that. So they talked about how they would, you know, really listen and understand what the employee was calling about, and then that they would direct them properly, and that they had people very experienced who could help them resolve the problem. And so we were debating amongst ourselves, like, what do we want? And this company looks like it's a lower cost, and this other, right? But I think the service would be like, and then somebody said, why don't we just call the number to see. Like
Yeah.
we could call one number and then we could call the other number.
Yeah.
So we called this number, and there was a push 1 for this and a press 2 for that and a press 6 for this, and it confused us at a few points, and we had to start over because we got into the wrong place. Anyway, and then ultimately we got to somebody, and then within 2 rings or something, they answered. And then we called the other company, and a person answered.
Mm.
It just like right away. And I remember this whole thing of like, well, wait a minute, but these guys said that they do a
Yeah.
12-second, like that they will be answered in 12 seconds. That took us a long time. Why
Yeah.
are they telling us it's 12 seconds? And then what happened is, of course, we find out they're talking from the point of your last push button. They will answer the phone in this time. Now, listen, everyone is well-intentioned. And you can just imagine these meetings in that company where they had a problem, which was wait times, and they solved it. And somebody sold them, technology people, the IT department, the other group, and they sold the decision makers on a solution that would solve the problem, which they did solve the problem. Just totally missed the point.
Yeah.
But they did solve the problem. And now they're all in there wondering why, although the wait times have been reduced, why there's still complaints. And the other one was, and they did call to ask us, is why we didn't select them. And we selected another company. They were so confused in terms of we selected this other company. And they couldn't understand because they met all our needs. And missed the point.
And that's such an interesting example, because the power is in the intention and the space rather than in the sort of on paper before. Oh yeah, we've got a problem, we solved it with this. But no, you haven't, because of the focus in the wrong place. Yeah. So, and if we go wider and we see that from that space of where you invest your consciousness, the non-linear change, transformation that can happen is really interesting. And that's what I find fascinating, is that this sort of, as I was mentioning earlier, about this belief that everything has to be linear. Well, that won't change until that changes, because that's, again, you've solidified the situation and you've come up with what looks like a universal rule about that situation. Oh, you can't turn a business around in that, or in a difficult market, you can't grow margins, or what it is, right? But again, that's because you solidified that, and then you're trying to solve that rather than come at it from a very different perspective without the limitation.
Yeah. It's what you have your attention on that is, it's kind of the way to describe is it's not about resolving or fixing this problem. It's about creating what you want instead. And so, I mean, this one, because it involves people, sometimes when I'm coaching and the leader has an issue with a colleague, boss, whatever it is, like they're never supporting my ideas, or they're, cutting them down or something like that, or I can't move forward. My boss isn't trusting me. They micromanage. They won't let me make decisions. Like, this becomes a barrier, right? And what's missing in that, again, mesmerized by a problem which is happening, right? Well, I keep getting questions about this, so now I have to respond and do work and analysis, and it's not productive. It's not actually accomplishing anything. And so typical coaching, and sometimes what they're looking for is, so what can I do about this? How can I have courageous conversations? Right? And fierce conversations, courageous conversations. Well, hang on a second. That sounds frightening. Why would you need a courageous conversation? Why would you need a fierce conversation? Well, because this is really bad. and it's got to be stopped, right? And you can notice the construction in your own mind of such a problem that it would require such force in opposition in order to get this to stop, right? So that would be an incrementalism of let me negotiate and let me make changes and have the conversation with my boss so that we can alter and change and, you know, go through, and step by step is like get to this new future that we desire. But it's all kind of like nonsense, and it's all perpetuation or hypnotism into the existing reality. Whereas when I've spoken with them around looking at this dynamic that is just happening, which is in other words, this relationship is a dance with movements.
Yeah.
There's a movement happening. And so your boss doesn't micromanage. There's just something you do which invites it. There's a way of being that invites more scrutiny, right? It's got nothing to do with your boss. If that were, and by the way, and this is true, but people misinterpret. I say, hang on a second, but how many direct employees does your CEO have? How many reports? Well, they've got IT reporting, they've got HR reporting, they got finance reporting, and on and on. So he's micromanaging all these areas? Oh, no. He never says anything to the thing. She never questions what IT brings forward. So what is this? Multiple personalities? Her boss has. What? So the idea of micromanaging does not exist inherent in another human being. It is what you're describing is the dynamic of a relationship, of an interaction. And so that you are co-creating together. So what is it you do that invites that kind of scrutiny? How do you be in the way you work that invites that level of supervision?
And it's interesting because what props up the illusion is they might say, yeah, but the old boss never used to do that with me.
Yes.
Right. So they would go, it must be the boss because in my old role, that didn't happen. So it can't be me because they didn't micromanage me.
Yes.
And that props up the illusion. And forgetting that each activity of consciousness that has the individual separateness of looking like two people is a fresh, different thing. So it may be that in the dance with the last person, it was just different. It doesn't mean anything about you or them, right?
Yeah.
And I think then if I can segue the conversation into the other part of the exploration that we're pointing people to, whether it's overt or covert, is you said 5 minutes ago, oh, I want to have some courageous conversations with my boss about their micromanaging. Now, the really powerful part of that conversation for me is the very first letter, I. Now, normally a coach would concentrate on, well, what do you mean by courageous? And what do you mean by the conversation? And what do you mean by micromanaging? You know, right? We get into that. I go, no. Let's have a look at the first word. And people are like, sorry, that's the most innocuous word of the whole sentence. Surely you go, no, that is the most powerful word of the whole sentence. Because what do you mean, I? Now, riff off that.
Yeah, because that's the beginning of all of that. What looks like a relationship is further identification of who I am. In other words, the way I know myself is relative to all things. Simply by noticing I, relative to this computer, am distinct. See how I get to know who I am, how I get to see who I am is distinct from that.
Yeah.
This is how I come into existence, is really relative to all things. And I relative to a boss that is like that. I relative to an organization that is like that. Identify what this is. See, my organization is like, they don't value people. See, I do. They don't. They make these decisions. It's all about money for them. Do you notice how my identity of that I gets stronger and reinforced relative to all things?
Yeah.
Relative.
And that's what, see, that relativity gets, and this is so interesting that I haven't really heard you say like that before, because I think it's interesting because that relativity gets reinforced as we go into the world, let's call it that, as we go from a child to a teenager to an adult. That relative, there's them and there's me and there's this and this. Now, the one universal thing that we are, which is unrelative, I don't know what the opposite word
Yes,
is, is
subject,
is actually the truth, right?
Yeah.
And that's, the one desire we all have, which is why we all come to coaching, but we'll come back to that. So is to see that, yes, although I've created this relativity to objects, the others, the apparent outside world, there's me and there's my tree or my bus or my hand, that's all apparent. That's all apparent. And what is really there before that, you could call it the big I or whatever you want to call it, the true I, the true self, is something universal and indivisible apart from in appearance. And when I recognize that, or when there's a dissolution, dissolving, and that becomes apparent rather than I recognize it, that is where the magic, I think, is to be seen and recognized. Now, I've just explained that in a fairly kind of heady way. So how would you say that?
Because, well, and we'll use another metaphor. I think everyone will get it. But this idea of I am aware, so it's kind of hard to, it's indisputable. We might even say, what's the difference between me and a dead body? It's consciousness. The difference between me and a dead body is consciousness. This is how close consciousness, what is consciousness? This is how close it is to you. It's not, it's inseparable, right? So in other words, if you just calm down a minute and just relax, what you'll notice is you're breathing. So, and then the question is, are you doing that? Are you breathing? It seems like there's some energy or movement that breathes you. And that's, and if you were to cut your finger without doing anything, in other words, just put a Band-Aid on it, don't do anything, that would heal itself. So there is some kind of an energy, and it is moving, and that energy is very intelligent. We might say it's infinitely intelligent. And that energy has awareness. It is like not an inert intelligence like you'd get on a spreadsheet or in list of facts. It's not inert. It is alive. And the difference between inert and alive is movement. The difference is awareness. It is aware of itself. It is aware of itself. And then you look and you say, so, okay, I get it. So I'm consciousness. I have consciousness. Funny, right? That word, I have consciousness. This is my consciousness. Right? So now you can see,
property of me.
It is me. This is me, my consciousness. I don't know about your consciousness, but I can tell you about mine, right? Which you can see why that seems reasonable. I mean, I get it. It seems reasonable. It's like I'm conscious. It's my consciousness. I don't know about them and what their consciousness is and what they're doing with it, but I see what mine is. It certainly appears that way. But that's no more true than the office I'm sitting in. And because when you say, I'm here in this office, and if you said, okay, but what is that? Well, it's in my house. It's this office in my house. If we really got into it about like, what is an office? What is this? Pretty soon we'd have to get to like really the value of it and the usability of it. And is space. This is the space. And now watch how funny it is. It's my space. This is my space, right? Oh, so, but if you look, there is something called space. And space is infinite and eternal. It is only space. What you are referring to as this is my space, is it not the same space?
Yeah.
That is that. So when you say this is my consciousness, how did you separate it exactly from all consciousness? Well, I put walls up. That's how I do it. That's how I know it's.
And I have a piece
my
of paper saying I own this space.
Yes.
A legal deed.
Here's the funny thing. Notice what I just said. How you got this to be your space is by limitation.
Yeah.
That's how it becomes my space. I limit the space. I put the walls up. I declare it mine. And it is from that limitation that I get to experience what is my space. And all suffering comes from that as well. Right? So from your misunderstanding that this is your space versus the potential and possibility.
It's a lovely way of saying it. And I was just thinking as you're talking, you know, we're sitting here in January 2024 when there's a couple of wars going on about lines on the map.
Yes.
Right? That's my country, that's your country, right? And there's no physical wall in that, but there's a line on the map which is gone, well, this is ours, this is yours. It's a limitation. So
can you imagine? Yeah.
I mean, I'm an alien, a Martian would go, what are you doing? Right. So it's not only does it create problems in the world of form, it's a great metaphor for how we see what we are in I being an entity that has a property of consciousness, and I'm conscious of the world, you know, but panpsychism would say that, you know, that everything has consciousness. And that's limitation. That is limitation.
Imagine that playing out in organizations.
And that solidity that we talked about solidifying earlier, how we solidify things, that we can only solidify something if we thingify it into not being an expansive space, but being a thing. And by definition, by thingifying, we're putting limit. Now, you know, occasionally there's a utilitarian usefulness of putting a discrete concept around something because it allows us to navigate and at a traffic light know that the red light means stop, and that, you know, so there's a utilitarian usefulness of having things defined. But remembering that definition is there as a rule of the game of life, not of being. That to me is a crucial distinction, because it's like I say, tennis would be less fun if there were no nets or lines, right? Because the fun comes in trying to get it over the net and in the line, right? So the same in the game of life. We have a utilitarian use for limitation, but we confuse that with creation and being.
Oh yeah, I think your metaphor is a good one, because in the absence of limitation, we could never enjoy that game.
Yeah,
we would never be able to enjoy that game. But notice the wording we used, and I think in our pre-conversation you brought this up as well, is that notice we're not confused. In other words, we made up this stuff. about tennis and how you can't cross a line and how you can't, jump over a net. Like, we made this all up. We completely, entirely limited ourselves in a total self-limitation for the purpose of enjoying ourselves.
Yeah.
Is to enjoy ourselves and to express and find within us more and more of the possibility that is who we really are, and to express that possibility through that game and through those limitations in an expansion of what's available to be enjoyed within that limitation. So there's something about when we can hold the limitation not separate from the truth. There are no rules. There is no such thing. That line doesn't exist. This isn't real, right? But when we can hold the form within the truth, then enjoyment becomes possible. When we're lost in our own delusions, then that is how war becomes possible.
Yes. And it's absolutely the loss in it's being mesmerized or hypnotized, as you said, in the delusion. We're never going to debunk the illusion, but we can see it and recognize it. So a dream is scary if you didn't know what a dream was.
What a dream was.
Right? Now, TV show would be scary if you didn't understand, or virtual reality or whatever, but we kind of know. So it's seeing that. And then I think the other part of this, which we can segue into because it's such a rich conversation, and I love this part of the conversation, is what makes that harder is when we think that is down to us, right? To control or do that what is limiting, what isn't. And you said earlier about, when we were letting the finger just heals, that is just coming through us as an intelligent energy you talked about. Now, that intelligent energy includes everything that appears to us in perception and thought. And the I that looks like it makes a decision, so we're going into the free will piece here, which I love, is which I is that? So we're going back to this I again that says things like, I'm going to have a authentic conversation. I'm going to have, which I is that? Because we've been taught from a young age that I is me, boundaried, limited entity me. And the choices that appear are my choices. And if we are being lived, which we've pointed to, there's breathing happening, there's healing happening, there's digesting of food happening, there's thought happening, there's choice happening. There's no chooser separate to the system.
Right. Here's what has no choice. Let's say it this way. Sydney Banks said, I don't know if he was repeating something or if it was said, but Sydney Banks makes the statement, there is only one will, and that is the will of God. And Sydney Banks often spoke about free will. Free will. You're using your free will. And especially in one talk, he talks for a bit about free will. And you follow and you go, wow, awesome, free will, etc. And then the next statement he makes says, and there is only really one will, and that is the will of God, right? And, we threw in the word God here, but I hope nobody gets freaked out.
Just call it the system or whatever you like.
Universal intelligence, all things, the system. So what is that? Well, in an organization, especially, like, why are there 500,000 people as part of this organization, right? There is something going on, like some energy, some movement, some calling, some desire. Something's going on. There are 500,000 people wrapped up in this, whatever this is. right? So what is that? There is a movement, a desire toward something, an offering of some, and it can be noble purpose or, whatever, but underneath it, there's some kind of intention, some sort of, aspiration. It is an imagining of something that can be experienced, that can be in the world that we've never experienced before. So this is the, if it's infinite, right? If consciousness is infinite, that means it implies expanding.
Mm-hmm.
And if it implies expanding, that means that the truth is beyond our experience. The truth is beyond anything we've ever experienced. The truth is beyond that. There is a movement of this consciousness toward experiencing beyond what has been experienced so far. And that we could call the only will there is to experience itself in more and more, in infinite ways. That expansion of consciousness as it becomes more of itself, as it expresses and experiences more of itself. That is always an expansion. So the only will there is, the only movement there actually is a movement toward know thyself and know thyself more deeply. That is the only calling that actually exists. And so what we feel as desire, what we feel as is, I want a bigger job. I want to make my company larger, right? All of that is so that I can know myself more fully. Because there is a calling of who I really am that is far more than I think, that is far more than I'm currently experiencing. And the way it is experienced by this limited I is in the desire for more experience of myself. Most of us don't put it that way. And for most of us, it isn't experienced that way. It isn't felt that way. The delusion is that I am trying to experience or acquire in order to add to what I have so that I can then be bigger. But the truth is, you already are.
Yeah.
You already are that. And so that is why the desire is to grab that stuff and bring it over here. But if you realized you already are that, you would then come into the world being that. And that is your true power, because from being that, you would, as an organization or as a leader, is you would actually be now expressing this expanded version, this expanded realization of who you are. And in the expression of that, it would manifest and be created in the world in that what was before a vision or not real would suddenly be the reality that there is.
And that actually, listeners, I'm not sure whether you've tracked this, but fits in so beautifully to what we were saying earlier about the not coming from solidity and lack.
Right.
So because it's about recognizing what you are. And I think the illusion is that let's call it the apparent avatar me goes into the world needing to have desires to achieve, to have relationships, to attain. And that is, and it looks like that's what we're talking about here, but we're not. We're talking about it completely the way around, actually, although they turn up in the same way at one level because they're about expressing life more richly or seeking or going to manifesting or whatever. But actually what's become clearer and clearer over the years is you can come at that from two very different places, and it can be confusing because you either come at that from little avatar me seeking in the world to try and get more, to be okay, which is coming from finiteness, kind of knowing there's more, but thinking I need more to be okay. And that actually is coming from scarcity and therefore resistance. And therefore that hits all sorts of treacle-like stuff where you get suffering and frustration. But then what we're actually talking about is when you recognize what we truly are at big I, if you want to call it that we already are expansiveness, but the form of that is in acquisition and achievement and whatever.
Experience of it. The experience,
and actually,
the form of it.
The irony, or maybe the paradox, is that when we are at our most resourceful and emergent is when the self, the avatar self, has dissolved and isn't seeking. So when we're in a loving relationship, what we're getting is the dissolution of avatar self, because we're experiencing the expansive. The same in an organization that's got a beautiful vibe to it. Those 500,000 people are losing the avatar self and becoming part of the collective. It's such a clear yet confusing one until you see it.
Well, and you know what? That you just that maybe the wording that when we say what's the difference between 3 years ago, 4 years ago when we had our conversations, that would be, this is so clear to me that this expansion, becoming more of yourself, more of who you truly are, cannot be achieved. That's maybe what's clear to me. That cannot be achieved. It is only something that can be allowed. It cannot be achieved. And this energetic difference is huge. It is like, because what's confusing is, I would say mostly, if you watched externally to someone who is in a state of allowing themselves to be more and more and more of who they really are, we would look at them and call them amazing. Like, look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing in the world. So they wouldn't be, sitting still. They'd be in expression, which is confusing, because then when we look at someone who is ambitious and striving, we would see a lot of activity, and then it looks like exactly the same thing. It looks like exactly the same thing. One has an effort, an exhaustion of personal energy in there. The other one has a dissolution, as you said, a dissolution of personal delusion and an allowing of infinite energy, of an infinite energy, which now moves them. They are moved. Organizations are moved. They are moved, right? You have now people moved in a direction of becoming more of the possibility that they envision. They are expressing, fulfilling more of the truth of that possibility into an experience, into a way that it can be experienced. So that can never be achieved. It can only be allowed. And it is a subtle but massive difference.
I think that's a nice linguistic difference to point to the, let's call it, energetic difference, the space difference. And that to me has become clearer and clearer and clearer over the years. I think you're absolutely right. And it's one of those ones that you can listen to it and go, oh yeah, I sort of know what you mean. You've got to turn up in a good space. Yeah, you've got to be in a good mood. No. It's way, way more than that. It's chalk and cheese to that. But until you kind of see more of it, even though we intuitively all do anyway, it might not look so blatantly different. But when you talk to leaders who are quite experienced, and they can tell the difference a lot more because they've probably been in both, and they will call it the secret. And they will call it the secret sauce. And then the question is, how because there's a lot of confusion around it, how do I have more of that secret sauce? And then accidentally, today's society is brilliant at trying to reverse engineer that in a way that gives you a mimic of it.
Yes.
Right? 1,000
Yeah.
tools or techniques, or here's how. But truly, for me, for my mind, and I think you're probably on the same page as this, Dominic, the way for that to be revealed, to appear, is by seeing what we truly are and aren't. Right? So it's going back to that. And I think you said something really neat earlier, is there's actually only one reason why people come to coaching. They don't know this, right? It's not what they'd write on the form. It's because at one level, we all know that expansiveness is what we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're seeking. But you said, but it dresses itself up as 1,000 things, right?
Yes.
In the world of form. And our job is to not get distracted by the 1,000 things, although to absolutely hold space for them, to be articulated, but to see actually what it's all about is the same thing.
Yeah. That's brilliant. See, that movement, that energy is toward more expression, realization of who I really am, more experience of who I really am. And to your point, people come to coaching as, I want to be in a bigger role, or I want to be able to, transform my organization so that we're at the next level, or so that we can, IPO, or, whatever they come. So it looks like that, but what they're wanting is, it could be stated like this: I feel a desire to be that being that would make that kind of a difference, have that kind of an impact in the world. I can sense a desire to be that. It is a desire to be. The reason it cannot be achieved, it can only be allowed, is because the you, the I, that would want to achieve that state of being is not that state of being. So what you are wanting to experience is not something you need to create that doesn't already exist. That would be so hard, to create something that doesn't exist. But what you feel as desire is not for something that doesn't exist, but you're feeling a desire, and you could feel that feeling of being that, of that beingness. And so it already does exist.
Yeah.
So, but why am I not experiencing it? Why am I not? Well, I'm not like that. I'm not. So it's like a self-limitation.
That's the limitation we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's because you're right. There's a recognition of what it is for you to know you haven't got it in a way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Well said.
And therefore, when we do achieve that, a success or an achievement or a something, there is a temporary lack of seeking, and that's what we think comes from the thing. So let's say we get the promotion, or we have the loving relationship for an evening. Right now, that isn't because anything changed in the outside world about your new job title, or about the fact your wife said well done, or you have a lovely evening. It was because the self that was seeking what it truly was ceased.
Right.
And that created the spaciousness for you to be what you already were, but you were in the limitation. So the finiteness dropped away temporarily until we create the next one, which is, well, now I'm promoted to CEO. I want to be, I want to have a bigger company. So we get back on the rat race again. But one word I want to tap into, then I realize we probably need to wrap this up with a bow, but maybe this is a semantic, pedantic red herring, but you use the word, you can't achieve it, you can allow. I'm going to challenge the word allow and say, well, why to me, it's not an allow, because that sounds like advocacy or agency. To me, it's a reveal. Can you say a bit more about your allow word?
Yeah, and by the way, it's so tricky. Let me say it like this. It can't, if I say it, it cannot be achieved. It can only be allowed. It can only be allowed. So now I've removed you allowing it.
You've got an agent in there of allowing, haven't you? No?
Well, it can only be allowed, and it is allowed. It is always allowed in the absence of resistance. So the agent only has a freedom of resistance. The only freedom you have is one of resistance. And by the way, that is necessarily so. Otherwise, there's no agent. And without an agent, there's no experience. That is necessarily so. Unless I put these walls up, I don't have my space, right? And once I don't have my space, there is no experience in my space. So the agent has agency for resistance, which causes experience of an agent, of the one. But if you want to expand the knowing of that I, that can only be allowed by the dropping of a resistance, which allows an expansion. But you will always, I say it like this, however, you will always be far more than you think. So I don't care how much resistance you drop. You will never be all that
you'll never reach the end of that.
Ever.
Yeah. You're not going to run out. Yeah.
Who you really are is beyond what you think and forever shall be.
Right.
It is an infinite expanding potential. You will never experience all that you are. You will never come to the end of it. Your whole existence is one of either resisting or, in the absence of resistance, allowing an expansion.
I'm really glad I asked that question about allowing, and it may not be useful for anyone else on the podcast, but because what I heard on there was a really nice distinction, because I'll try and say it in my words and you tell me if I've got it right. The world that we experience, the world of form, humanity, humanness, there is an individuated appearance of a subject-object relationship turns up, and there is an agent of experiencing, an agent of experiencing, which by definition is a limitation of infiniteness. So all that experiencer can do is be a limitation, which is brilliant. It is beautiful. It allows us to have the richness of being, right? Being human, which is lovely. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Not that I can. So the reason you would use the word allowing is it's paying respect and homage to the fact of experience. Because if you didn't put that perceived experiencer in, then there's just oneness and no individuation, no actual human experience. So that's what you're sort of respecting by using the word allow. And that makes sense at that level. But I think
and it is essential to respect that.
Yeah.
Let's take this to the Middle East.
Right.
Peace can never be achieved, but it can be allowed in the Middle East, and it will never be achieved, no matter how many smart people start working on achieving peace in the Middle East. And do you know what it would take to allow peace in the Middle East? Is to stop trying to achieve it. Stop trying to achieve it. Here's the truth. Were it not for all of our bullshit, peace would be allowed.
Yeah.
Peace would be allowed. So I honor this human experience.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And I think that's a really neat way of putting it. And I think what you're not saying by the word allow is you're not trying to reinforce the illusion we have that there is a separate me separate to consciousness and the world, my consciousness that needs to allow this stuff. And if it, and you know, you're not using allow like that. You're not giving it volition to have a free will that is separate to the one.
Well, so that piece is already its true nature.
Yeah, exactly.
And that piece would be there were it not for resistance to it. So, and why is there resistance to it? Because of its true nature. And its true nature is an ability and a freedom to focus and experience anything. You are so free. Your freedom, in the nature of your freedom, is so free you can experience bondage. It is so free you can experience conflict. Because if you could not experience anything other than one thing, there is no freedom. There is no freedom.
You can experience the multiplicity of psychological objects, right?
Yes.
That's available.
You experience the one thing there is in the freedom to experience it in infinite ways, and infinite ways is always, there is nothing off limits.
Yeah.
And if you were to contain that only to the experience of true nature, that would imply a bondage within it. That would imply no freedom within it, because there's no choice. And without choice, there can be no freedom. Without choice, there is no freedom.
Yeah.
The experience of the universe has no limit. That war is available. It is offered. It is possible. And you cannot eliminate the possibility of that experience. It's available. And the true nature is one of peace. And the minute you move out of the resistance of true nature, which you are free to experience, you will fall into your true nature. And you will rise back out of it, expanding your own consciousness into greater and greater questions. How do you experience peace when someone else wants something you do not want? Well, thousands of years ago, we knew how to do it. Kill them. And thousands of years later, that's still the best idea. That still seems the best idea, that the only way I experience peace is by eliminating all opposition to it. And that's an idea. It is an experience. There may be a bigger idea. There may be something beyond what you've thought so far, beyond what we've all thought so far, that's available to us, that we can experience. That doesn't require that. But you've got to be willing to drop the bullshit around what you insist is the only way that can be experienced. I experience my abundance by taking from others, from the scarce world and limited world we have. It's the way you get to be the richest person in the world. That could be bullshit, right?
Yes. Let's mute on that one. What a rich conversation. I'm wondering, Dominic, whether the last 20 minutes you and I just had a lovely conversation, whether anyone else will enjoyed it as much as we did, because there's a lot of nuance in what we're saying here, and we covered a lot of ground. But just for the sake of time, we probably need to bring it to an end.
And we're going to trust that they enjoyed it as much as we did. We couldn't have had that much enjoyment without it resonating with others.
Rich and nuanced, and there's a lot in that, and it's one I will listen to a few times. But so to bring things to a close, is there anything you want to just wrap up and put a bow on? I mean, we've covered a lot of lovely ground. What anything occurred to you in this moment where you just want to kind of double down on something? Or
maybe the only thing is to say is the word awe. Come into the world, into your life with awe. Awe brings wonder. right?
Yeah.
So wherever you have a problem, bring wonder to it. It may not be what you think. In fact, what you think is what your problem is.
Yeah, and I think it's what we said right at the beginning, with the shackles of our own thinking, and if we can see beyond that, and there's always available to do that, right? We're never going to run out of, oh no, I've hit the edge, because by definition, thought is finite. Every thought is limitation, and therefore, if you think it, it's no longer infinite. So, the apparent solidity of perception, thought, and sensation, and to see the liberation that lies behind that, and that's what we're all looking. That's what we all are, but we got this self-imposed limitation. Not that we can do anything about that at a free will level, because that's just it just is. But the ability to see through that opens up this amazing thing, which you and I get to talk about every day with our clients. Our clients get to experience, and it's why people come to transformational coaching. That's why they don't know that. They come with the 100 things they've been mesmerized, as you say, hypnotized in to see, but then they and then when they taste that, they're like, aha, there we go, off we go, there's the magic. And that's why the conversation never sort of runs out, because there's always more to see, that it's infinite. And it's not like, well, I've done that now. I mean, that's why I've been curious in this for 25 years. And it just seems it's as fresh now as it was 25 years ago, probably more. You'd think, well, I would have run out now of stuff to explore. No, I'm just getting started. So, Dominic, it's been 3 years. Let's not wait 3 years again.
Yes, I agree.
I feel like we could have one in 3 minutes time. Thank you so much for giving us some of your valuable time. And I know you're always open to take questions or comments from listeners.
Right. Yes.
You're on a lot on Facebook. You're on LinkedIn. Anywhere else people can get you?
Yeah, my name, Dominic Scafidi, right, .com, my website. I'm on YouTube as well, with lots of talks and conversations and all of that. And and there's links there to my corporate website, which is hrpossibilities.com. But
I would recommend listeners, if you haven't already, which you probably have, but new listeners to the show, check out Dominic's stuff. It is really beautiful food for thought, highly articulate, really nicely talked about, and you know, listen to it 4 or 5 times, you'll get loads out of it. So Dominic, thank you so much for coming on, having the conversation.
Yes.
And listeners, have fun being curious. Until next time.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and want to know more, check out our website at qualityofmind.biz. And also, feel free to reach out and leave us a review or a comment. Until next time, have fun being curious.